Folks, we're going to get started in about a minute. I just want to give the people some time to connect to the webinar, so please bear with us. All right, I think it's time we should get started. So good morning or good afternoon for those that live in communities that follow the Central or Eastern Standard Times. I want to welcome everyone to our webinar. It's entitled Reducing Toxic Chemicals in the Garment Cleaning Industry. I'm Ed Gonzalez, and I work at the Pacific Northwest Pollution Prevention Resource Center, and we're also known as PPRC. We're a nonprofit organization based out of Seattle, Washington, and we basically serve the environmental programs of the Pacific Northwest, and we've been doing so since 1990. Today's webinar will cover 3 presentations. As you can see here on the agenda, give me a second. Our first presentation will discuss EPA Safer Choice Program, which will be presented by Ali Lorenz. Our second presentation will cover safer alternatives to POG spotting chemicals, and POG is an acronym for paint, oil, and grease. Katie Wolf, a chemical engineer scientist, will be the presenter, and she is a subcontractor to PPRC. Our third presentation will be conducted by Steve Whitaker and Katie Fellows of the Hazardous Waste Management Program of King County in the state of Washington. Their presentation will focus on 2 incentive programs for dry cleaners, one from King County and the other from the Washington Department of Ecology. But before we begin, I want to share several points. First, this webinar will take approximately 1 hour, with a question and answer period slated at the end of the hour. If we take a little bit more time, folks, I would appreciate it if you can stick around if you can. It's possible that in the question and answer period, we may go over the 1 hour limit. A second point is that this webinar is being recorded, and so it would be made available to everyone in about 1 week from today. I'm going to be sending out a notice with a link to all of you, so you all know when it's ready for view. The third point I want to make is that I will be sending out an evaluation of this webinar early next week. We'd like to hear from you. We'd like to get your feedback so that we can improve our service for future webinars. So please take the survey and help us out. Okay, now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Ali Lorenz. And Ali is a physical scientist who reviews products and ingredients against the program's criteria for safer chemistry. Ali, thanks for agreeing to be a speaker in this webinar. I'm now transferring the controls to you, so take it away.
Thanks, Ed. And the sound was breaking up a lot for me. I don't know if others are experiencing the same.
You sound clear to me.
Okay, that's great. Are the slides showing?
Yes, Ali, we can see your slide.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Ed, for the introduction. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to provide a brief introduction to the Safer Chemical Ingredients List, or what we call SCIL, and the criteria behind it. But first, I wanted to give a quick explanation of how SCIL relates to the Safer Choice label, which you can see here in the bottom left corner of the slide. Safer Choice is a voluntary program at EPA. We certify products that use safer chemistry, and we primarily work with companies that manufacture household and facility cleaning products right now, but we have the flexibility to expand the program to other types of products as well. The core of Safer Choice is looking at chemicals according to their functional use, for example, solvents, preservatives, surfactants. And chemicals that meet our criteria are eligible for listing on SCIL. Products that meet the Safer Choice criteria, on the other hand, are eligible for the Safer Choice label. On our first slide here, you'll find a link to SCIL. It's available on EPA's website and is a living list of over 950 chemicals that meet Safer Choice criteria. By living, we mean that we update the list periodically, about 2 to 4 times per year. We're always looking for new chemicals to add to the list. Primarily, SCIL is a tool for manufacturers to research whether their product formulations might be eligible for the Safer Choice label. But we've also heard that folks use it as a sustainability measure, including for products that aren't certified. And lastly, for chemical manufacturers, SCIL highlights areas where innovation is needed. Some examples are preservatives and oxidant stabilizers, where you'll see a lot of yellow triangle chemicals when you look at SCIL. We'll talk about what I mean by yellow triangle in a minute. This next slide shows a screenshot of SCIL. You can see all the functional use classes listed here. And below the list of classes, you can search by chemical name or CAS number. As you explore SCIL, you'll see that we have 3 color codes, or you might hear me call them geocodes: the full green circle, the half green circle, and the yellow triangle. These are visual indicators of the status of each chemical. Full green circles meet all the criteria required for their functional use. Half green circles are expected to meet the criteria, but there could be some data gaps, and if we had additional data, we might elevate those to full green. And then yellow triangles indicate that innovation is needed because these chemicals are the safest available, but have some hazard profile issues. Note that a chemical's geocode could theoretically differ by functional use. So a chemical that is one of the safest oxidant stabilizers might not be allowed as a solvent because it might not be among the safest solvents, and there are lots of green circle solvents already available. Our evaluation of a chemical depends on the function and the available alternatives. Here you'll see all of the endpoints that we review in considering the hazard profile of a chemical. We look at human health, environmental fate, and environmental toxicity. As a baseline, we do not allow listed CMRs or PBTs, carcinogens, mutagens, and reproductive developmental toxins, or persistent bioaccumulative toxic chemicals. But we review all available data for each chemical before making a determination and assigning a geocode. Of course, we prefer experimental data for chemicals, but sometimes that's not available. So we also consider analog data for closely related chemicals and modeling data to fill data gaps so that we can best understand the full picture of a chemical's hazard profile. All our criteria are available on our website. We have what we call our master criteria as well as criteria by functional class. Thank you all, and I'll pass it back to Ed to introduce Katie Wolf next, and we'll take all questions at the end of the webinar.
Oh, thanks, Allie. And now for our second speaker, Katie Wolf. Katie Wolf is a subcontractor to PPRC. She was previously the director of the Institute for Research and Technical Assistance, or IRTA, based in California. Katie's an expert in low VOC, low toxicity solvent alternatives in cleaning, dry cleaning, electronics, paint stripping, coatings, lubricants, paint thinners, and adhesives. Take it away, Katie.
Thanks a lot, Ed. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about spotting chemicals. And this effort is part of a larger project that's being conducted by PPRC under an EPA assistance agreement. Some of you may know that Congress amended the Toxic Substances Control Act in 2016, and it charged EPA with developing a list of priority TSCA chemicals that they believed were used in applications that posed a high risk. And if that proved to be true, EPA would then go on to regulate them. We're focusing our project at PPRC on the first 10 EPA priority TSCA listed chemicals. Spotting chemicals are used quite widely by the garment cleaning industry to remove stains both before and after the main cleaning process. In particular, PLG spotting agents have been designed to remove paint, oil, and grease, as well as various other organic contaminants. And traditionally, these PLG spotting agents were based on trichloroethylene, perchloroethylene, and N-propyl bromide. These three solvents are carcinogens, and they also happen to be on the list of the first 10 TSCA priority chemicals. Now, how do you do spotting? Well, the spotters actually apply the POG spotting chemical with a little bottle that looks like a ketchup bottle. And I'm showing some here on this spotting board. And generally, the spotter will use some kind of a tool, like a little piece of bone or something, to work the POG spotting chemical into the stain. Now, in certain cases, they will need to flush the POG spotting chemical out of the garment with steam and blow it off with compressed air before they put the garment into the main cleaning process. Otherwise, the POG spotting chemical could leave a ring on the garment. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to tell you what the spotting industry looks like today. I'm going to talk about some of the ingredients in certain of the POG spotting agents, and explain how I looked at their health and environmental characteristics. Some of the ingredients pose problems, and I'm going to talk about safer ingredients that could be used in their place. Now, I did two projects when I was at IRTA in the Los Angeles area more than 10 years ago. The projects were designed to test and demonstrate safer alternative POG spotting chemicals in garment cleaning facilities. And the second of those projects was completed in 2006. And at that time, TCE was the most widely used chemical in POG spotting agents. There were also certain POG spotting agents that were based on PERC. The industry knew that PERC was under real scrutiny for toxicity because of its use in the main cleaning process. So they thought they'd formulate with a chemical they perceived to be less toxic, which was TCE. Now, of course, it's not less toxic. And at that same time, a major manufacturer, a major supplier of N-propyl bromide, Envirotech International, was aggressively marketing that chemical, not only for use in the main cleaning process, but also in POG spotting chemicals as well. Now, based on the work we did at IRTA, the California Air Resources Board passed a regulation that regulated spotting chemicals for use in California. The regulation banned TCE, perc, and methylene chloride in spotting chemicals. Now, methylene chloride really has never been used much in spotting chemicals. It's too aggressive for certain types of materials, and it can also dissolve decorations or things like buttons if they're made out of certain material that can be on garments. Even so, the Air Resources Board decided to include it in the list of chemicals they banned because they were including all three chemicals in bans on other product categories they were regulating. The ARB regulation also set a really low VOC limit, and N-propyl bromide, since it's classified as a VOC, couldn't be used in these spotting chemicals any longer either. Now, most of you know that there's been a big decline in the need for dry cleaning over the last decade or so. Garment manufacturers are using fabrics that don't need to be dry cleaned, and workplaces have become less formal so that you don't have to wear dry clean only garments to work. The decline in the overall demand for dry cleaning has also led to a commensurate decline in the need for spotting chemicals, and there's been a lot of consolidation in that industry. In particular, one large spotting chemical supplier has bought out a couple of the smaller ones, and several other of the smaller ones have gone out of business altogether. So the California regulation and the decline in demand for dry cleaning has really led formulators of the POG spotting chemicals to start using other materials in their spotting chemicals. There are only a few TCE POG spotting chemicals left on the market today. They're not dominant anymore at all. And almost no POG spotting agents are now based on perc. I think I only found one while I was doing this project. And N-propyl bromide is no longer used at all in spotting chemicals. So what are the formulators using as alternative? Well, they have three solvents that are in some of these formulations: glycol ethers, glycol ether acetates, and hydrocarbons. Some of the formulations also contain surfactants, so they'll be rinsable. There are certain formulations that contain fragrances, which gives the POG spotting chemical a pleasant odor. Now, I wanted to look at the ingredients in some of the POG spotting chemicals. So I started out with three major suppliers: A.L. Wilson, Chrysler, and R.R. Street products. A.L. Wilson and R.R. Street had developed each three POG spotting chemicals that would specifically comply with the California regulation. Chrysler, who is an international supplier, opted to not develop a specific California-based spotting agent. The R.R. Street products did not list the ingredients on the safety data sheet, so I couldn't examine them in more detail. I did look at the A.L. Wilson and the Chrysler products, however. I also included some products from a survey that was conducted by the Hazardous Waste Management Program in King County. They did a survey of garment cleaning facilities to see what chemicals they had on site. And they kindly provided me with a list, and I screened it and pulled out a couple of the chemicals that were classified as POG spotting chemicals. So here's a list of the POG spotting chemicals I looked at in more detail. There are three A.L. Wilson products, and all three of them are in compliance with the California regulation. There are four Chrysler products and two additional products from the King County survey. Now, two of these chemicals, Deprit Professional 6 and Newhouse Lemon Ink, may incidentally comply with the California regulation, although they weren't designed to do so explicitly. I've looked. They don't contain TCE, perc, or N-propyl bromide, so the only real question is whether they comply with the VOC limit in the regulation. And I've looked at them fairly carefully, and I'm quite convinced that they both do comply with the California regulation. Now, I wanted to look at the health and environmental characteristics of some of the alternatives, and I based that by going with the ingredients that were listed on the safety data sheet. And I relied on several sources to do this evaluation. The most important was the EPA Safer Choice Program, which is a collaborative program with industry. And as Ali discussed in her presentation, the EPA Safer Choice people established a skill, a safer chemical ingredients list, and I'm going to refer to that in what I discuss. Now, I did use several other sources as well, and I'm going to call out one of them, the King County Hazardous Waste Program. They wrote a report on some analysis they did on 2 hydrocarbon solvent alternatives to PERC in the main dry cleaning process. These were DF2000 and EcoSolve, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Now, as I mentioned, there are several solvent alternatives being used in these formulations. Glycol ethers and glycol ether acetates are good solvent ingredients in this particular application because they can solubilize both water-soluble and oil-based components, making them very versatile. Many of the glycol ethers are also water-soluble, so they can be rinsed out if they need to be. And in general, the higher molecular weight glycol ethers, like propylene glycol ethers, for example, are generally considered to be safer than the lower molecular weight glycol ethers, like ethylene glycol ethers. Hydrocarbons are also really good ingredients in this application because they can remove oils and greases. Naturally occurring hydrocarbons are generally hydrotreated to remove metals and sulfur, but it's never really cost effective to distill them enough to completely remove the aromatic fractions they might contain. Now, aromatic fractions are things like benzene and toluene, which can be very toxic. So in place of the natural hydrocarbons, you can actually use synthetic hydrocarbons, things like DF2000 and EcoSolve, which I already mentioned. And the King County hazardous waste analysis demonstrated that these 2 formulations contain no aromatic components and that they didn't exhibit acute aquatic toxicity. Aquatic toxicity can be another problem with natural hydrocarbons. There are various other solvents that you can find in some of these formulations as well, things like esters, for example. The dibasic esters are low in toxicity, and methyl esters, which you can find in soy-based and coconut-based oils, are also relatively low in toxicity. As I also mentioned, some of these formulations contain surfactants. Certain surfactants like nonylphenol ethoxylates are endocrine disruptors. You can replace them with linear alcohol ethoxylates, but you should be sure that the replacement compounds don't exhibit high aquatic toxicity and that they're relatively biodegradable. There are also fragrances in some of these formulations, and some of the fragrances that you will find have toxicity problems. There are some you can use, however, that are safer. So I'm just going to show you 3 formulations that are POG spotting chemicals and discuss the ingredients in them. The first one here is Newhouse Eliminate, and it has no problem ingredients. It contains 3 green circle surfactants as listed on the scale, the EPA Safer Choice scale. And it also contains a glycol ether used as a solvent. It's listed as a green circle solvent on the EPA scale. Now, the suppliers or manufacturers of this particular POG spotting chemical could, in principle, submit the formulation to the EPA Safer Choice program, and they'd have a good chance of obtaining a Safer Choice label. Here's another formulation, Deprit Professional 4. It's offered by Chrysler, and it does contain a problem ingredient, which is the isoparaffin C10 to C13. The CAS number for this chemical indicates that it contains aromatic components. The isoparaffin, a natural hydrocarbon, is not listed on the scale, and it's not likely to be acceptable primarily because it contains the aromatic component. Now, you could, in principle, replace this with a synthetic hydrocarbon like DF2000 or EcoSolve. This formulation also contains another ingredient, N-butyl acetate, and it's present in the formulation in a 30 to 50% concentration. And that high of a concentration indicates it's being used for its solvent properties. N-butyl acetate does have a fruity odor, however, so it might also be being used for its fragrance properties. N-butyl acetate is not currently listed on the scale, and EPA has not evaluated it. If you wanted to replace it, you might replace its solvent capability with another structurally similar solvent, propyl acetate. Propyl acetate also has a fragrance, so it could function in that respect as well. Alternatively, you might be able to replace the N-butyl acetate fragrance capability with another fragrance altogether that's listed on the scale. And I'm going to show you one of those on the next slide. Now this is Stanford POG, and it contains 3 solvents. The first is a glycol ether, and it's listed as a yellow triangle solvent on the scale. The second 2, dimethyl adipate and dimethyl glutarate, are components of a dibasic ester. And they're both listed as green circle solvents on the scale. Then we have a fragrance, N-pentyl acetate, and it's present in the formulation in a less than or equal to 3% concentration. And that's how you know it's being used as a fragrance, because there's very little of it in there. It is listed as a yellow triangle fragrance on the scale. Then there are 2 non-ionic surfactants in this formulation. The first non-ionic surfactant is not currently listed on the scale, and it's not likely to ever be acceptable. It turns out that it exhibits high aquatic toxicity. The second non-ionic surfactant is listed as a green circle surfactant on the scale. Now, what could you do to fix this formulation? Well, you could take out the first non-ionic surfactant altogether, and you could hope that the second non-ionic surfactant would serve the whole purpose. If that were not the case, you could even beef up the concentration of the second non-ionic surfactant. Or alternatively, you could replace it with another surfactant that was listed on the scale. Now, just to wrap up then, the California regulation really prompted the formulators of POG spotting chemicals to develop safer alternatives to TCE, PERC, and N-propyl bromide-based products. Some of the alternatives they have on the market today still contain problem ingredients, but as I think I've demonstrated, you can generally replace them with safer ingredients. You can find some of the ERDA studies on POG spotting chemicals on the ERDA website here. And this work that I'm describing here today, this is the report on which it's based at PPRC. And here's my contact information. Please feel free to call me or email me with anything you want to discuss about safer alternatives and solvent applications. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I'll be glad to change the presenter to Steve.
Thanks, Katie. And now let me introduce our third speaker, Steve Whitaker. Steve is a toxicologist for the Hazardous Waste Management Program in King County in the state of Washington. Steve focuses on hazardous chemicals and safer alternatives assessments and has covered areas such as dry cleaning solvents, automotive paints, and lead contamination of aluminum cookware. Steve, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Ed. Are my slides visible?
They are.
Thank you. So thank you, Ed, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to describe a program we've been running since June 2018, which is to convert our perchloroethylene or PERC dry cleaners to professional wet cleaning. I'll start off by talking a little bit about who we are as a program and what we do, and I'll briefly introduce our overarching safer alternatives strategy. Katie will then describe our first safer alternatives project, which is to make King County PERC-free by 2025. Our program's jurisdiction is primarily within King County, Washington, which is the most populous county in Washington state with approximately 2 million residents. Our program has an unusual organizational structure being comprised of 4 implementing local agencies, as well as contributions from various cities and tribes. But what unites us is our funding source, which is surcharges on solid waste and wastewater. So I don't have time to describe the need to identify and implement safer alternatives in this webinar. I'm sure most of us are familiar with the need. But the Has Waste program considers this type of work to be a cornerstone of the work we do. And recognizing this need, myself and our policy liaison, Ashley Peterson, drafted a resolution for consideration by the King County Board of Health in April 2018, which encourages the program to develop a safer alternative strategy to encourage safer alternatives and green chemistry initiatives in King County. And it encourages us to partner with state and local stakeholders so that the program becomes a regional, if not national, leader in the field. And I should mention that this resolution was adopted unanimously by the King County Board of Health. The first safer alternative strategy we developed was to switch dry cleaners from dry cleaning with perchloroethylene to a safer alternative process. Back in 2010, we conducted a survey of the dry cleaning community in King County to get a better understanding of this business sector. And this is what we learned. Most shops were still using perc as their primary dry cleaning solvent. The vast majority of shops were owned and operated by immigrants from South Korea. The vast majority of shops were family owned. And just under 1/2 of shops had employees. And we later discovered from field visits that most of those employees were Latinx or Hispanic. And so from our perspective, there's clearly some equity and social justice issues to consider in this industry, considering that many of these workers have limited English language skills while using some of the most hazardous chemicals used in any industry. So what do we know about perc? It's a probable human carcinogen. There's evidence to suggest that dry cleaners who use perc have an increased risk for a variety of cancers. And there's also some evidence to suggest that people who live near dry cleaners may also have higher rates of certain cancers. Unfortunately, we found that many dry cleaners, and as I said previously, most of whom are immigrants from South Korea and their employees typically Latinx or Hispanic, are not aware of the dangers of using perc. And as many of you know, perc is also a source of major environmental contamination, resulting in a number of very expensive cleanups. This diagram shows the ways that perc can be released in a dry cleaning shop. In fact, perc can even travel through concrete, where it can then contaminate soil and groundwater. And then as a dense non-aqueous phase liquid, perc can then settle in an aquifer, where it slowly releases so it can infiltrate basements even some distance away. Perc is also transformed in the environment to trichloroethylene and vinyl chloride, which are themselves carcinogenic solvents. And here in King County, we're particularly concerned about contamination of shallow aquifers, which some of our local cities use as their sources of drinking water. Here I'm holding a photoionization detector about 6 feet from the rear of a perc machine. And it's reading 148 parts per million. You do have to apply a correction factor to get to the perc concentration. So clearly this is demonstrating a major leak in this machine. And of course that leak has the potential for adverse impacts both on the workers in the shop and adverse effects to the environment. The good news is that safer alternatives to perc are available. And as Katie's mentioned, we've done some extensive studies on many of these alternative processes. And upon reviewing all this information, we decided that the preferred alternative to PERC is professional wet cleaning, which uses water and detergent rather than an organic solvent. And we've seen this technology advance so much in the last 2 to 3 years that now any fabric with a dry clean only label can now be cleaned in water using this new professional wet cleaning process. We then had to decide how best to convert PERC dry cleaners to professional wet cleaning. So we reviewed a variety of approaches that have been used across the country, ranging from outright bans to financial help, demonstration programs, and signage to inform the public. And in the end, we decided to offer a financial incentive. In fact, we're providing a reimbursement of $20,000 to dry cleaners who purchase professional wet cleaning equipment. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ed to provide an intro to Katie.
Thanks, Steve. And now for our fourth speaker, Katie Fellows. Katie's an environmental scientist for the Hazardous Waste Management Program in King County. Katie's recent interests include green chemistry and alternatives assessments and community efforts to reduce lead exposure. Katie, the mic is yours.
All right. Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Steve. So this picture is of a typical PERC dry cleaning machine. The system is extremely complicated, and you can see that there's plenty of opportunity for leaks and other maintenance problems. And apart from the exposures to the toxic chemical, as Steve discussed earlier, PERC machines also generate hazardous waste. Contrast this with professional wet cleaning, where the setup is much simpler. The machines look a lot like, hold on, whoop. Are you guys seeing the panel on the side on my screen? Or just the slides?
Yes, we can see it all.
I don't know how to.
No, you're good. We see
Okay.
the slides.
Okay, you just see the slides. Good. All right. So yeah. So the wet cleaning machine are much simpler. The machine they look a lot like a home washing machine, only slightly more advanced. They have tubes hooked up to meter various detergents, and this technology is safe for health and the environment, with the added benefit of also reducing utility costs in many shops. We've watched a professional wet cleaner successfully wash dry clean only fabrics ranging from wool suits to silk ties. So from our standpoint, this technology works. Our goal is to create a PERC-free King County by 2025. So in order to reduce the number of PERC dry cleaners in the county, in June of 2018, we began offering $20,000 reimbursements to shop owners willing to switch from PERC to wet cleaning. And during this pilot program, which ran through June of 2019, we switched 11 shops over to professional wet cleaning. And our goal is to continue to switch 10 shops per year until all the PERC dry cleaners in King County have converted to professional wet cleaning. So for this pilot program, we began to recruit shops mostly by creating a relationship with their vendor, who then recruited the shops into the program. And at our initial visit at the shop, we conducted a pre-switch survey and measured PERC levels inside the shop. We issued financial paperwork, and when the new machine was ready to be installed, we did monitor the removal of the PERC machine at a few of the shops alongside a state industrial hygienist. And after this process, we then provided the shop with the reimbursement funds and checked in on them periodically. If the shop was experiencing any problems, we contacted their vendors to provide them with additional help and training. And 6 months after their new machine was installed, we then conducted a post-switch visit where we administered another survey and issued them some promotional materials. We also referred them for EnviroStar certification. We developed promotional materials for the program in both English and Korean. So in addition to this flyer you see here, We also provided a handout that detailed financial help, such as utility rebates or organizations willing to provide loans to small businesses. And we developed posters for the shops to place in their windows and on the shop counter. These were developed in collaboration with the dry cleaning community in order to be considerate of language and information that they felt comfortable disclosing to their customers. So this is what we learned in the course of our pilot program through our surveys performed at the shop visits. The median age of PERC machines in King County is 18 years. 8 of the 10 machines we tested were leaking PERC. The cost to switch to professional wet cleaning ranged from $50,000 to $70,000. And of the 10 shop owners who switched, 1 was Caucasian, 1 Vietnamese, and 9 were Korean. And this number of Korean recipients roughly mirrors the fraction of Korean dry cleaning business owners in King County as a whole, about 80%. When we went back to the shops about 6 months after they switched, we asked them the question, how happy are you with your decision to switch from PERC to professional wet cleaning? And initially we had 1 shop that was quite unhappy and another that was in the middle, but overall most shops were either happy or very happy with the conversion. Some initial complaints from those experiencing problems included dye bleeding, shrinkage, and excessive finishing time. But the 2 shops that were having those problems at first are now doing much better after working with the equipment vendors and receiving more training. We also learned that the overall cleaning cycle time is significantly shorter with professional wet cleaning than with PERC, and that most shops spend roughly the same amount of time finishing their garments as before. And as I'll discuss later, the shops that have tensioning equipment spend a lot less time finishing than those that do not. And of course, once the shops switch to water, they are no longer purchasing PERC or disposing of PERC containing waste. And there is now no solvent odor in the shops. And 7 owners suggested that their health had improved after switching. So we inventoried the process chemicals used in the shops before and after they switched from PERC. And we found that a lot of products were used with PERC dry cleaning, many of which contained high concern chemicals like carcinogens, persistent bioaccumulative toxics, and reproductive and development toxicants. So in the left-hand donut here, you'll see that we identified 57 unique products in PERC dry cleaning, 22 of which, almost 40%, contained high hazard ingredients. And then on the right, you can see the products they switched to after adopting professional wet cleaning. So not only are there far fewer products, but only 4 of the 24 products contain high hazard ingredients. These high hazard products are mostly legacy products from PERC dry cleaning, and we are working with the shops to have them adopt safer alternatives. So some lessons learned through our pilot program is that trusted individuals in the dry cleaning community, such as vendors, are much better messengers than government workers. It's important to evaluate the shop's infrastructure before switching. It's also very important to manage PERC exposures during machine removal and to provide documentation and guidance for the workers doing this work. There is a learning curve associated with the new equipment. Follow-up training is needed for most shops. Tensioning equipment is essential and will cost most shops an additional $20,000. However, the reduction in labor during the steaming, pressing, and finishing is significant. And you'll need to ensure that the hazardous spot cleaners are removed during the conversion process as well. So since our pilot program ended in June of 2019, we've switched an additional 10 shops, putting us at 21 shops total. And there are an additional 10 shops that we've issued paperwork to. They're just waiting to decommission and install new equipment once they're able to make the purchase with their vendors. So that leaves us with 43, or hopefully soon to be 33, shops left in King County still using PERC. And the Department of Ecology is now offering a similar incentive statewide. So they will reimburse a shop $20,000 to switch to professional wet cleaning, or $10,000 to switch to hydrocarbon. And through their program, they have helped 24 shops switch from PERC, 20 of which switched to professional wet cleaning, and 4 to hydrocarbon. So here are some links where you can access some of the research reports we have authored on dry cleaning, as well as a promotional video put together starring one of our very satisfied shop owners. And this program has also generated quite a bit of media coverage, from Elle and Vice to Popular Science to local news. And we were also nominated and are a finalist for the King County Executives Performance Excellence Awards for the program's focus on environmental justice. So this project has been a real team effort within the hazardous waste program between a number of our teams, including policy, research, and business services. So that concludes our presentation, and now we welcome any questions that you might have. And I'm giving
Thank
you
you,
the
Katie.
control, Ed.
Can you pass me over the controls?
Yep.
Okay. Give me a second here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Additional information. Okay. Well, now it's time to answer some of your questions. Keep in mind that when you submit a question, please write in the speaker's name, so we'll know who to direct the question to. But I have a question. So I'm aware that the Department of Ecology has a similar program as King County's, but I believe ecology is a statewide rather than countywide. Is King County collaborating with ecology in any way when it comes to this project?
I'll answer that question, Ed. This is Steve. Yes, we are. We've been working very closely with Miles Perkins and others at Ecology on this process. We are coordinating, site visits and so on and so forth. And one of the great advantages that a dry cleaner in King County has now is that they can take advantage both of the $20,000 from us if they switch, to professional wet cleaning, as well as an additional $20,000 from Ecology, providing them with a total incentive of $40,000. So yeah, we're very much coordinated with Ecology in this process.
Okay, thanks. Here's another question. Did you receive any assistance? Give me a second here. It keeps on moving on me. This one's for Steve or anybody. Any opinion on ECHA adding DS to SVHC list with similar restrictions in Washington? I'm not sure exactly how that question is worded, but does that make any sense to you, Steve? Or Katie?
What was the question again?
Yeah, I know. Could you repeat it, please?
Okay. It's for Steve or anybody. Any opinion on ECHA or ECHA adding D5 to SVHC, the list, and would similar restrictions in Washington and the U.S. be useful?
Oh yeah, that's the European program, REACH, and I would love to see D5 added to that list.
Yeah, I believe we're talking about a siloxane-based dry cleaning solvent, and we don't feel that we have enough information about its toxicological or environmental properties to recommend it as a preferred alternative to perchloroethylene. We wouldn't provide funding for a shop to switch to D5.
And the same holds true in California. At the South Coast Air Quality Management District, I don't believe they any longer provide funding for D5.
Okay. I often hear from dry cleaners that wet clean is an excellent tool for most soil garments. However, it is not aggressive enough to clean everything, and therefore, 100% wet cleaning is not viable. Also, some 100% wet cleaning facilities outsource some garments. Can anyone comment on these concerns?
I can comment on that. I think it really it depends on the technology you're investing in. Not all professional wet cleaning systems are equal. The system that we described in our presentation is very advanced with, computer-based computer technology that really closely monitors water temperature, agitation speed, direction, while metering in, one of like a half a dozen different process chemicals, detergents, and so on and so forth that are specifically selected depending on the fabric. That's the sort of system that we have seen work very, very well. Now, there are other systems that are being marketed as professional wet cleaning that where the vendors are recommending just using sort of Kirkland's signature brand detergents. And that's where we have a little bit of concern about the ability of those systems to successfully clean all dry clean only fabrics. It is true that some dry cleaners are concerned enough about going to 100% wet cleaning that they may also install like a small high flash point hydrocarbon machine as well, which we will allow because we do consider the high flash point hydrocarbons, comprised of DF2000 or EcoSolve as sort of the second best alternative to professional wet cleaning that's currently available. But so the questioner does have a valid point there, but it really depends on the technology that you're investing in.
Okay, thanks, Steve. This next question is for Katie Wolf and Steve. Could you talk a little bit more about how you worked with vendors?
Should I start?
Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
I just worked in the dry cleaning industry for, I don't know, close to 40 years. So I just try to contact the people that are involved with whatever I'm doing, who are in the industry, and try to work with them to get input from them and see if I can help them in any way as well.
And Ed, the hazardous waste program has been working with our dry cleaning community long before I started in the program. I mean, we probably have a 25+ year history of working with the industry, and thanks to the working relationships that have been developed, especially between our business field services staff and the dry cleaning owners and industry reps. I mean, we really have a really good trusted relationship. We also, for a period of time, hosted some interagency work groups where we occasionally invited reps and business owners to come participate as we were thinking about moving forward. We even hosted annual meetings of the Korean Dry Cleaners Association when it existed at local Korean restaurants. So we've spent a lot of time building our relationship with the community. And in this specific project, what happened was when we were initiating this professional wet cleaning project, we reached out to every vendor that we were and manufacturer that we were aware of. And very fortunately, early on, one of our local Korean-owned vendor businesses became a distributor for Miele professional wet cleaning equipment. And in our pilot program, especially, we relied on the vendor to do a lot of the outreach to the shops, because obviously it's in their financial interest then to convince the PERC dry cleaners to switch to water. And so that ended up being a very effective partnership. Since then, we've had more vendors come online, but in the pilot program, it was primarily this one vendor.
Well, and I just wanted to mention one other thing. One of the reasons I wanted to use the EPA Safer Choice program to look at the health and environmental characteristics of the POG spotting chemicals in this particular project, there were two reasons. And the first reason was I thought maybe the EPA Safer Choice people might want to establish a program in Safer Choice for garment cleaning chemicals, and POG spotting chemicals would be a subset of that. The second reason was that I thought that the POG spotting agent suppliers and manufacturers might want to submit some of their formulations to the EPA Safer Choice program to try to get a label, an EPA Safer Choice label. So I had that in mind right along, and I have discussed that with a couple of the POG spotting chemical suppliers. And I would like to encourage them again to go forward with that.
Thanks, Katie. Next question is for Steve or Katie Fellows. Can you talk a bit more about where the $20,000 fee comes from?
Yes, of course. So we're very fortunate in the hazardous waste management program to have a stable source of funding, and essentially those funds were repurposed from our operating budget. We just received a commitment from our management to set aside at least 10 grants or 10 reimbursements of $20,000 each per year. So the funds actually come from our internal operating budget. They've just been repurposed for the purposes of this particular project. And this isn't unusual for our program. We've done similar types of work in the auto body industry. So recently we've helped businesses, auto body shops, switch from using solvent-based base coats to waterborne base coats by providing them with $20,000 reimbursements. And we routinely provide lower levels of reimbursement to help with all sorts of improvements in our small quantity generators here in King County.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Next question for King County. Have any of these programs received pushback associated with 1,4-dioxane discharges? Are the detergents and spotting agents evaluated for 1,4-dioxane concentrations?
We haven't received any pushback. I am not aware of the presence of 1,4-dioxane in any of the detergents that we're aware of that are currently being used in professional wet cleaning.
Okay. Next question. Did you receive any assistance from the King County Small Business Ombudsman Environmental Assistance Program since they are non-regulatory and confidential?
I'm not aware that we did. I know that my colleague Ashley Peterson, who's the project manager for this, did actually reach out to them early on, but I'm not sure that we received any direct assistance from them going forward.
Next question is, how long is this program going to last? When did it begin and how long is it going to last?
The program started as a pilot back in mid-2018, and our goal is PERC-free by 2025, but we have a commitment to provide this sort of financial incentive until all PERC dry cleaners who can and want to switch to professional wet cleaning have converted.
Okay, I think those are all the questions we have. I don't see any others. But I want to thank all of you for attending this webinar, and I want to thank our presenters, especially for providing their time and expertise on the dry cleaning industry. If you have any questions regarding the webinar, on my screen you can see a few contacts, and you can email with those inquiries. As a reminder, I'll be sending out an evaluation and a notice later on next week, and hopefully you'll be able to fill it out and send it back. The webinar is being recorded and will be available next week. Hopefully, I'll be sending out an email with a link. And with that, the webinar is now over, and may all of you have a wonderful rest of the week, and make sure you stay healthy, folks. Thank you, and have a great day.